Okay, so this is going to be my Mythic Plus guide for Eye of Azshara. For the first few pulls, you'll mostly be coming across Nagas. So the most important casts that you want to watch out for are Arc Lightning, Lightning Prod, and a channel called Storm, something along those lines. Um, Most of them do massive AoE damage, so you want to make sure that they don't get those casts off, or if they do, um, they generally don't one shot, but in combination, the group could wipe. So you really want to make sure with stuns, interrupts, and even knockbacks that you try to prevent as many of those from going off.
Still proc even if it's immune. Goddamn fucking turtle. Or you can kill this. Oh shit, that thing took off. Did you see that shit?
Yeah. Swarm, careful. If you pull the Hate Coil Crusher along with other packs, I think an important aspect that you want to focus on is having the tank focus on interrupting the Thundering Stomp that the Hate Coil Crusher casts. This cast does a large amount of AoE damage to the entire group and it knocks you down.
Oh
Um,
no.
and it's interruptible, so the tank should save his interrupt for that, and then everybody else in the
I got
party
stunned.
can
Oh
focus
fuck.
on interrupts for the other mobs.
You get that
Finish off
wrangler?
the other stuff.
Yeah.
I'm gonna trap the Wrangler. Oh, never mind.
Oh,
Taking
we don't
damage.
need to. Yeah.
He's stuck in. Can you
Oh,
knock him
oh,
out of
yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah, yep.
I'm netted in a. We're good.
How did you do that?
I MC'd him.
You can MC these? It's fucking awesome.
Oh, he's
Why is he?
back in it. What the fuck?
He's like chasing you. I don't understand why. I'm trying to. I like taunt him 3 times.
Yeah.
He just wants you. I'm gonna paralyze that. You gotta read dot. Sorry.
Oh, I mean, pull him. Can I stun here?
Sure.
Okay.
Stunning.
What? Who?
I was trying to stop his carpus.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, I just saw him move into the singlet. Next,
Yeah,
the
that was the
only
first shot
new
for the shield thing too.
mob that you'll come across is called the Hate Coil Oracle, and the cast that you want to focus on interrupting is going to be called Rejuvenating Waters, which is a heal. Stun in 3. Stunning.
Those warriors aren't messing around.
They're going ham on you.
Yeah.
Don't touch the ranged caster. Okay, so the first boss is actually
Two.
much more challenging than you would think. I feel like if certain people in the party aren't as clean with executing mechanics, then it could be very disastrous. So there are various aspects to the fight, but I feel like once you kind of got it down, it's not so bad, especially if you play ranged. Um, so throughout the fight, he'll occasionally keep summoning 2 ads. One is a caster ad, and one is melee. Usually the caster ad will be crowd controlled on the side until he decides to throw a spear at somebody. The mechanic is basically you want to run behind this ad So you want the ad to be in between you and the boss. And if he picks you, you go behind the ad and he'll throw a spear and the ad will take it instead of you. The spear stuns you and also does a massive dot damage over time. So basically, if you take a spear and you don't have an immunity, you'll die. Your healer won't really be able to keep you up. But also on higher tyrannical keys, ranged or if you don't have any range, just DPS need to finish off the ad that gets speared because the spear damage itself won't be enough to kill it off. And then the melee ad is usually just brought onto the boss and cleaved down. Um, there are times where the caster ad CC is broken and she ends up free casting, so in those cases, just try your best to interrupt her and also try your best to keep one ad up for the spear, because if both die, you're kind of screwed if you don't have somebody with immunity. And then one important aspect that he does is called crashing wave. Melee want to provide a generous amount of distance when he casts this because the hitbox is pretty large and you will be one shot if you get hit by it. And then really just my final tip as ranged that I don't think a lot of people take advantage of is always just stand next to the ad that you plan on using the spear because I've seen cases where people stand, wherever you first started the pull on, they wouldn't move at all. And then later on, if they get picked to be speared, they're so far away from the ad, they just don't make it there in time. So I would say always position yourself next to the ad. That way, when you're chosen, you don't have to move that much. You don't panic, you're anticipating it just in case you get picked. And it just makes the fight that much more smooth. Okay, so after the first boss, you will have to kill 2 Hate Coil Arcanists in order to cause the Naga boss to be targetable and engageable. Um, these mobs are really not that bad, although on Fortified it would be good to interrupt Arcane Rebound because the cast can hit relatively hard. If you have a healer that is on top of the spells, and I'm talking really, really good at dispels where they would dispel polymorph the second it goes off, then you don't have to worry about interrupting them. However, if your healer is really lackluster and lazy about it, then I would always interrupt it because just leaving a DPS in a polymorph for more than 1 to 2 seconds is such a waste of DPS, especially for this mob where people are rarely at risk of dying. So this mob is really easy. Just rotate and coordinate your interrupts.
Serious math to figure out if we're gonna get one shot by this electrical thing. How much health do you have? I pull like pretty much everything in here, right?
Yeah, we generally do staples coming.
Snail's dick. It's kind of an interesting mob. To, like, make him target people and run after them. Combo. We'll go clear the next area for wait hero for this guy. I'm gonna grab these crabs.
So usually after you kill those 2 Nagas, uh, right after the first boss, most groups tend to go straight to Serpent tricks. instead of the Naga boss because she's a tougher boss, and having heroism for her is extremely helpful. So you end up skipping her and going straight to doing the trash right before Serpent tricks. And you want to make sure that you clear most of the trash around it because you really don't want to pull extra while you're doing the boss.
I'm so slow right now. See that?
Things you want to focus on when it comes to the Hydra and the hard shell is interrupting the hard shell's armor cast, I believe. And just when you engage the Hydra, as you can see, if there's blue swirlies on the ground, you just never want to get hit by it. On Fortified, they will one-shot you, and you don't want to stand behind them because they do a tail whip.
Grab a bunch of crabs. There's more crab too. Uh-oh.
That's a lot. That's stunning.
Fuck, I need to.
Binding's out.
I'm just gonna keep kiting them. I don't want these guys to touch me.
Fuck, it's their stun and...
It's only a couple.
Something to keep in mind for the Silt Walker is to pay attention to the direction they're facing because they will cast something called Spray Sand, which deals a massive amount of damage, and the damage output also occurs very quickly. So even if you get hit by one and try to move out of it, by then you're probably already dead. They also cast a magic debuff, but I have never even seen what it does because I usually dispel it off right away. Just yeah, if that debuff goes out, just dispel it. There's usually low damage output going on for these trash pulls. And then just one more quick tip. Before you pull the boss, there tend to be seagulls that kind of float around this area. It would probably be a good idea to pull them and kill them individually before you engage the boss, in case you have classes that have random AoE that might aggro them during the pull. Um, they're really annoying because they disorient you for, I think it's maybe 2 seconds, and when that happens, aggro drops on that target. So if they end up disorienting your tank, it could kind of screw you up if the boss ends up targeting melee and hitting them a few times. So definitely worth killing.
I'm still all the way back here. Cause I got that green shit.
Okay, so Serpent Tricks is generally an easy boss. The only time he is difficult is if ads live too long, and they really shouldn't because they cast spells that either deal massive single target damage with consecutive casts or AoE damage from Blazing Nova. So him by himself, all he does is occasionally he casts Poison Spit, which shows green swirlies on the ground that you have to move out of. What I have noticed is if you move the second it goes out, then you shouldn't ever be hit by it. Generally, it could also be a good idea for you to start strafing if he's in the middle of his cast. That way you would already have moved out of the swirly if it spawns underneath you. But of course, if you're a class that does not have that much mobility and you have to stand and cast pretty often, you can see in my video, like if I move and jump out the second it starts appearing under me and I'm not using Power Word Shield, I don't get hit by it. And then he also does one more thing where he places a debuff on you and you end up dropping green puddles that you want to just be careful where you place it. Try not to place it in areas that could be invasive, like if
Good to have so many
it could
ranges
get
to
in the way
choose.
of when you're moving towards the boss when he submerges and emerges on the far end. Like you just don't want to make it problematic for your other party members. So when he submerges and reemerges, he will also come up with two ads. One is arcane and one is fire. The fire one does AoE damage every cast, and the arcane guy will get stacks that will cause his cast to deal increasingly more damage the more casts he gets off. So DPS need to switch to them. Interrupt and stun works on them. So usually I pick one that is closest to me, and I start off with stun after dotting it, so I can get my Sephu's buff. And then I follow that up with my silence. And hopefully by then they should be dead. At most, they could maybe get one cast off, but you really want to minimize that as much as possible. And then after that, the boss is really just rinse and repeat. I believe when he reemerges, he does channel AoE damage that someone needs to interrupt right away. But really, aside from that, it's not so bad. What I have noticed also is if you second pot on this boss and go straight to the Naga boss, then you'll have maybe upwards of like 20 seconds before you get your pre-pot off for the Naga boss. Um, if you want to sort of spend that time wisely, it could be good to pull other trash that you might need for percentage as well.
Okay.
Oh, something, whatever. Let's go. I don't know.
Alright, here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so the third boss you usually come across is the Naga boss. I don't think she's that challenging. She's usually more difficult because of people messing up mechanics. Otherwise, if you do it pretty smoothly, it's not so bad. When you first pull her, you want to be standing on land because her first cast will be Static Nova. And if you are in the water, you'll get stunned. You'll get a magic debuff that deals electric damage. I think it's a dot. So if the healer doesn't actually heal you up right away, if you manage to survive it, you'll probably die. Um, since it's a stun also, and if it doesn't kill you, humans can human racial out of it, which is helpful. But you shouldn't really get hit by that if you can, because it's extremely predictable. Throughout the fight, she alternates between casting that and focused lightning. So it's basically a rinse and repeat of going on land, and right after she casts Static Nova, you want to go into water. And you want to spread out also, because Focus Lightning does a um, small AoE radius around you, and it deals massive damage. So you really can't get hit by more than one of those. Um, at high keys, it actually hits for an insane amount. I feel like it hits for maybe 95% of my health at times. So maybe on Tyrannical it could be useful or maybe even necessary to wear Pride as for it. But basically for that, once you get hit by lightning, you want to go onto land. Main things that make it a little challenging is that tornadoes will spawn nearby players, and if those tornadoes come in contact with you, obviously they'll knock you up. If they come in contact with plots of land, it will destroy them. So one very important thing you want to take note of is where those tornadoes are located and if they are close enough to you and the land that you are on. Um, Usually it's safest to pick land that isn't near any tornadoes And if one is approaching you, you might as well move to another one before her cast just to be safe. There are times where it will destroy your plot of land right before the cast finishes, and then you'll end up without it and you'll die. And lastly, she spawns ads. They're the oozes that you've come across earlier as well, and when they die, they do leave a magic debuff that reduces your movement speed. She places a curse on several party members that after it expires or is dispelled off, it will shoot like a spray or a conal in front of you forward, and if these come in contact with the ads, it will one-shot them. So usually you pretty much want to use it for that purpose of killing the ads. Um, the main thing that you really, really want to be careful with though is when it's about to expire, you don't want to be facing anybody else, especially if she's casting Static Nova, because people blow each other off of platforms and then they kill their party members that way. And it is possible to still DPS her while your character is like facing a different direction. So try to make use of that, and if you really can't do it without facing a party member, just take that loss of DPS and look away just to make sure it doesn't happen. Um, that is really, really important. But those are really the main factors of the fight. When the ads come out, I usually like to stun them right away just so later on they don't get stunned in maybe some bad position or something. But they are a good way to proc Sefus. Usually I like to save dispersion on these fights for oh shit moments, or if the boss is close to dying and there is one more hard-hitting mechanic that is about to go out that you just want to make sure you live through. So for example, if all of us are alive and maybe she's at 20% and will only be getting one more focus lightning cast off, I just let my healer know that I'll be dispersing the next focus lightning to I guess let them know that they can focus their healing on somebody else. Also, it just gives them a sense of relief that um, you'll be reducing that damage taken, and just it really is a tremendous help to know that you're using a cooldown defensively and to ensure that you survive.
That brings us to the last is 8%. I think we still need how much percent? It's like 1, 2, 3. We're gonna need these.
Got the Murlocs coming too, right?
That was within Murlocs.
Well, these are the Murlocs. I haven't been attention to this.
Yeah, I'm like not even a part of the party when we pull Murlocs in packs like that.
We need to get to like 92.
Wait, what?
I don't know what the fuck.
That was a like weird spray. Did damage in a different direction, right?
You hit all of us back here.
Yeah.
Alright, so this guy is almost 2%. Fuck. Let's go up. We can kill a snail up top.
What was the order? What were we doing again?
I'll ride you up.
I spent some time in here doing that.
So before the fourth boss, you come across two giants. I am pretty sure that you're still able to skip them if you do it correctly. When I first ran this dungeon with my friends in the very beginning of Legion, we had a Guardian Druid tank that did this pull extremely well. Um, Usually he would stay on the right side facing into the pathway, and we would clear the Murloc camp on the left side just to allow us for more room. And what he would do is we would all be mounted on the left side. He would aggro them, pull them outwards towards away from the boss basically, and we would wait until
What?
they were away from the entrance a decent amount of distance before we would run through, and we would go to the back left corner of where the boss is located.
Here we go.
And then after that,
Make
he
sure
would
you get
just
some swirls,
go
cause
travel form or go bear form and try
swirls don't
to
exist.
uh, get through the passageway, and then he would allow himself to die, and then we would just resurrect him.
Stomping.
Uh, I think it still works. I just don't think many people know how to perform the skip, and without practice, we don't tend to risk having them do it because if you wipe, it's hard to recover, and it's an
Stomping.
unnecessary wipe if they don't know it for sure. But basically, I actually am not familiar with
Really
which
far away from me.
giant casts which one. I've never focused on that stuff. But one of them casts a stomp that just knocks you down and stuns you for a second. And then the other one spawns blue swirlies under your feet, and they knock you up and deal damage if you are still there when they go off. So it is kind of a combination where one giant knocks you down, and then you're
Yeah, we should
knocked
just
down
go
in a swirly and you can't move out of it, and then you take that damage, which could
Alright, here
be
we go. 3,
potentially
1.
leading to your death if it's fortified. So you just want to be careful and try to make sure you're always moving during the knockdown. That way you aren't stationary when that wave comes crashing up. Alright, so for the fourth boss, he's actually not really too difficult. I feel like I said that about every boss, but I've also had a lot of practice with them, so I'm very familiar with their mechanics. Um, One thing that melee and tanks want to watch out for is he does a cast called Ground Slam, and then there's going to be a large circle on the ground that you just want to move out of so he doesn't stomp on you and kill you. Another aspect of the fight is called Quaking or Quake or whatever, and it's just a cast that he does where he does AoE damage to everybody, and then he leaves like a cloud of dust that's just on the ground next to you. You want to give yourself a reasonable amount of space away from it so you don't take damage from that after it goes off. And then after it goes off, you see uh, cracks on the ground. Those cracks basically will signify where Quake will occur again, but he will also spawn an additional one every time. So he'll spawn one where uh, it left off from the first Quaking, and then he'll also do another. So basically, in a sense, it starts crowding a specific area depending on where you're standing. That's why the tank needs to move the boss eventually for melee to not be forced to stand next to Quake just to continue DPSing the boss. And then the other aspect is a few people will be selected and placed with a debuff that is a bubble around their character. What you want to do is you want to take damage and pop this bubble before it expires. Because when it does AoE damage to everyone in your party. And if that bubble goes off in combination with Quake, then people will die. And it's really not that hard to make that bubble go off. You could use the water swirly stuff that is moving around the room. That doesn't do a lot of damage though, so usually what I found to be the best thing to do is use one Quake. You do have to be careful though that you position yourself to only take damage from one Quake, and when I say that, I'm talking about the cloud that shows up and then the subsequent damage that goes off after it. If you stand next to more than one of those, then your bubble will pop and then you will take further damage from the other Quake as well, and it could possibly kill you. Another good thing that you could use, aside from Volcanic, is kind of a cheat in this video because it helps pretty well for the bubble. But the lightning indicators that occur throughout this dungeon, the blue swirly. So if you see it, then just go stand in it, and it helps you get that bubble damage to make it pop. But those are really the mechanics of the fight. There isn't a lot, so he's generally not a boss that you should worry about wiping on. Okay, so after the fourth boss, the last four mobs that you have to kill before you can engage the last boss are these Nagas that you kill individually. On Fortified, you want to interrupt Lightning Blast for sure, or if you don't have an interrupt for it, that person that she's casting on will need to use a personal to avoid dying. And then they also cast a magic debuff on people that is called Arcane Bomb. The healer will want to dispel it, and then people just don't want to stand in that when it goes off because it'll pop you. She also casts Polymorph, so that can be handled the same way as I discussed earlier. On the last two Nagas, though, they also gain a few more casts that the first two don't cast. One of them is called Magic Binding, which is something that priests handle extremely well. On these last two, I always tell everybody to stand in melee range. That way, when it goes off, I can mass dispel everybody, and you don't have to handle the mechanic. Um, if it isn't dispelled off, it roots you in place, and then it is basically a dot that deals quite a large amount of damage. So you really want to be careful, and possibly pop personals if you don't have a way to remove it. So snare removal works on that, and then um, if you don't have mass dispel, then your healer could probably choose one individual to dispel, and then figure out other ways to handle it. As you can see, I used dispersion to dispel one off myself as a snare removal. And then the only other cast that they gain is Storm, which is similar to the mobs at the very beginning. That is just a circle indicator around the mob that deals damage to anyone standing inside, so you can just interrupt that as well.
Fine.
To get this behind this.
I'm gonna have to disperse out of that because yeah, no mana for it.
Let's go clockwise. I don't have a dispel. I got it. Okay, next. Alright, you ready?
Yes.
Alright, here we go. 3.
Okay, so the last boss is quite the clusterfuck. When you first pull, tanks often stand away from the group because his first cast will be Massive Deluge, which places a large blue circle on the ground, which will then go off and deal damage if you're standing in there. So once he places it on the tank, then the tank will group up with everybody else for the remainder of the fight. There's just a whole lot of shit going on in this fight. There's passive AoE damage that I think grows over time. There will also be tornadoes that spawn that knock you up, and it's pretty important not to get hit by them because then you'll take fall damage, and then you might just land in an inconvenient area. You won't be able to group up to help soak Crushing Depths. So Crushing Depths is a cast that he does on somebody. It's going to be an arrow indicator above their head, and then there'll be a circle that demonstrates where you can stand, where you'll soak the damage. So everyone wants to stand in this to help divide the damage. Only if people have immunities at high keys should soak them individually, because I've tried once, I think mistakenly, on Tyrannical to soak one by myself with dispersion, and I just died at the beginning of the fight. So don't do that. You can definitely use dispersion later on in the fight to uh, just help reduce damage, like I mentioned earlier, to help out the healer. Um, Another thing that I think is important to note is I feel that it is better to move clockwise around the boss than counterclockwise. And this is based on the fact that I think is true, where the waves always come counterclockwise. So if you're moving against the waves, you're not being chased by them, basically. So if they're coming at you, you can just maneuver around them and not worry about that wave anymore. But if you're going the same direction as the wave, you're moving away from them, but you're still having to deal with that same wave chasing you. So I just think it doesn't make a lot of sense. I just think if you maneuver around them, then you don't have to deal with that wave anymore. It passed you, and you can worry about other things. It is definitely really important to move as a group for this boss fight. That's why you choose the direction to move in. Um, every single crushing depth needs to be absorbed. If it starts getting hectic towards the end of the boss fight and he's low on health and it's becoming very difficult to heal, then you can sack the person that has crushing depths to hopefully, lessen the healing needed, because that would just be one person dying compared to 5 people being low and making it much harder on the healer. But it's just really all about dodging, staying alive, and popping cooldowns. I definitely always make sure I use Vampiric Embrace towards the uh, latter half of the fight. Definitely use Health Potion whenever you drop low, and just dodge whatever you can.